What would you do if one day your in-laws threw you out, telling you that you were not good enough? I once stood in the rain with nothing but a small suitcase, tears blending with the downpour, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. But 5 years later, the very person who cast me out was the one kneeling, begging for my help. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's a story of how I turned pain into power, rejection into resilience, and how I discovered that success is the sweetest revenge of all. Join me as I take you through my journey from rock bottom to the heights of power and the most valuable lesson I learned along the way. You will never be good enough for this family. Those words still echo in my mind every night. I can never forget the look in her eyes, cold, disdainful, like she was staring at an insect, not her daughter-in-law. I stood there in the lavish living room of my husband's family home, holding a fresh bouquet, the first gift I had ever brought for the mother of the man I had married just 3 days ago. 3 days, only 3 days after the wedding, and I was already being treated like an intruder. "I brought you these flowers," I stammered, struggling to keep my voice steady. She glanced at the bouquet, then down at my shoes. Somehow, I just knew. I had worn the wrong thing, said the wrong thing, been the wrong thing. Everything about me was wrong in her eyes. "Do you even know how much that bouquet costs?" she asked, her voice low and cutting. I don't," I mumbled. "Don't call me mother. And don't bring cheap things into this house. We don't need charity." My face burned as if she had slapped me. My fingers trembled around the bouquet, gripping it so tightly that a few petals fluttered to the ground. As I bent down to pick them up, my purse slipped from my shoulder and landed with a soft thud. "Look at you," she sneered as I fumbled to gather my things. "Clumsy, unrefined. I don't know what my son ever saw in you." The happiness of my wedding day vanished in less than 5 minutes. I tried to hold back my tears, but they welled up and spilled over anyway. I turned away, not wanting her to see me break. "What's wrong, honey?" my husband asked as he walked in, concern flashing across his face when he saw me crying. "She's just too sensitive," his mother said sharply. "That's exactly why she's not fit for our family. A woman must be strong. She must know how to behave." I looked at my husband, silently begging him to defend me. He said nothing. In that moment, I realized my married life would never be the fairy tale I had dreamed of. I had entered a family that never wanted me, and the man I loved would never truly stand by my side. Have you ever felt completely alone, even while standing in a room full of people? Have you ever felt your heart shatter in just a matter of seconds? If you were belittled from the very first day, what would you do? That was only the beginning of my nightmare. I didn't know then that those cruel words were just the opening act of what was to come. And I had no idea that one day, those very words would become the fuel that would change my life forever. That first day was just the beginning of a long, dark chapter. Everything I had dreamed about marriage, laughter, cozy family dinners, a warm home filled with love, evaporated as quickly as morning mist under the sun. Family meals became the moment I dreaded most each day. We sat around a long, luxurious table, the fine china gleaming under the chandelier. The food was always delicious, prepared by the housekeeper, but the air was cold, heavy, and hostile. I felt less like I was sharing a family meal and more like I was sitting through an interrogation. "Do you even know how to use silver chopsticks?" my mother-in-law asked when she saw me fumble slightly with the intricate silverware. "Or is it that no one taught you basic manners where you come from?" I bit my lip, forcing myself to stay calm. "I'll learn," I said softly. "Learn? At your age, you still have to learn the basics?" Her words were sharp needles, pricking my skin. But what hurt even more was my husband's silence. He just kept his head down, focusing on his plate, pretending not to hear a thing. At night, when it was just the two of us in our bedroom, I tried to talk to him. "I don't understand why your mother hates me so much," I whispered, tears rolling down my cheeks. "I've tried so hard." "You're too sensitive," he replied, not even meeting my eyes. "She's only doing what's best for the family. You just need to try harder to fit in." That conversation played out over and over again, and little by little I realized the man I thought would be my rock was part of the problem. Raised under his domineering mother's shadow, he'd never learned to stand up to her, and he never would. Every morning, I forced myself to control every word, every action. How I ate, how I spoke, how I dressed. I scrutinized everything. But no matter how hard I tried, I was always an outsider in that house. Sometimes I caught fleeting glances from the housekeepers, pity and quiet sympathy in their eyes. They understood what I was going through. Maybe there had been others like me before, but none had lasted long under this roof. One afternoon, when we crossed paths in the kitchen, the oldest housekeeper whispered to me, "You're the third one, you know." "Third what?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The third woman he brought home. The other two left within months." My heart froze. I wasn't the first. I was just the next victim in her cruel game of power. I tried to seek support from my husband, but it was like reaching out to a ghost. Whenever I needed him most, he was nowhere to be found. During family gatherings, when his mother humiliated me, he would just sit there, silent, sometimes even nodding in agreement. His weakness hurt me more than her cruelty ever could. "What's your husband doing?" my mother asked worriedly over the phone. "You sound so sad." "Everything's fine," I lied. How could I admit that my dream marriage was crumbling into a nightmare? How could I confess that the man I loved wasn't strong enough to protect me? Night after night, I cried alone in the bathroom, muffling my sobs so no one would hear. Staring at my reflection, I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. Hollow eyes, gaunt face, a smile long gone. I can't live like this forever, I told myself. But where would I go? What could I do? I had no idea that the answers to those desperate questions were closer than I ever could have imagined, and they would come in a way I never expected. The fateful day arrived on a rainy afternoon. I had just returned home after picking up a few groceries for dinner. Even though we had housekeepers, my mother-in-law always insisted I run these errands myself, so she knows her place, I once overheard her telling my husband. As I stepped through the door, I found the entire family, my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and husband, sitting together in the living room. The tension was so thick I could feel it pressing against my skin. "What have you been hiding from us?" my mother-in-law demanded, her voice icy and sharp. I froze in place, rain still dripping from my hair. I don't understand what you mean," I stammered. "Don't pretend to be innocent," she barked, throwing a thick envelope at me. It landed at my feet. I bent down and picked it up. Inside were old photos, snapshots of me with friends from university, birthday parties, everyday moments from a young woman's life. There was nothing scandalous, nothing shameful. "They're just old photos," I said, trying to steady my voice as my heart pounded wildly. "Look at how you're dressed. Look at the people you're with. Is this how a decent woman behaves?" She spat. "I told my son from the beginning, you are not worthy of this family." My father-in-law, usually silent, simply sighed and shook his head. And my husband, he just sat there, eyes fixed on the floor, too cowardly to look at me. "What's wrong with these photos?" I asked, my voice trembling. "They're from my past before I even met him." "A woman from a respectable family would never have pictures like these," she screamed. "I've done my research on you. Your parents are just simple farmers. Did you really think you could trick your way into our family?" Tears welled up in my eyes, not from shame, but from rage and heartbreak. "I love your son," I said, my voice cracking. "I never cared about your wealth or your status." "Enough," she shouted. "From this moment on, you are no longer part of this family. Pack your things and leave." I turned to my husband, a desperate flicker of hope still clinging to my heart. "Will you really let them throw me out?" I whispered. He finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine. For a split second, I thought he might stand up for me, that he might say something, anything, to defend me. But then he only sighed and said, Maybe we need some time apart." My heart shattered in my chest. This wasn't just betrayal by my mother-in-law, someone who had never accepted me. This was betrayal by the man I had vowed to love for the rest of my life. "So you're choosing them," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You always choose them." I turned and walked up the stairs to the bedroom, a room that had never truly felt like mine. I pulled out the small suitcase I had brought into this house just a few months ago, filled back then with dreams and hope. One by one, I packed my things, each item a painful reminder of the life I thought I was building. The wedding photo on the wall, I didn't touch it. It wasn't mine anymore. The gifts he had given me, I left them all behind. I didn't want to take anything from this life with me. Dragging my suitcase down the stairs, I saw them still sitting there. Cold, silent statues. No one spoke. No one stood up. No one walked me to the door. At the threshold, I paused and looked back. At the grand house that had once been called home. At the man I had once called husband. "One day," I said, my voice raw with tears but burning with resolve, "one day, you will come to me and beg." I don't know where the strength to say those words came from. Maybe it was the survival instinct buried deep inside me, the part of me I hadn't even known existed. The door slammed shut behind me. The rain poured down, mixing with the tears on my face. I pulled my small suitcase along the wet street, not knowing where I was going, not knowing what tomorrow would bring. But somewhere deep within the cold, in the pit of loneliness, a tiny flame began to burn, a flame of anger, of wounded pride, and most importantly, of determination. I didn't know it then, but that day, the worst day of my life, was also the beginning of a new one. A life I would build with my own two hands and no one else's. The tiny, damp room on the outskirts of the city became my first shelter, a worn-out bed, mold-stained walls, and the constant noise from the streets. But at least it was a place where I could bury my face in the pillow and cry without anyone seeing or judging me. "You need to pay the first month's rent up front," the landlady said, her old eyes scanning me from head to toe with thinly veiled suspicion. "I don't take checks, cash only." I handed over almost all the cash I had left, my meager savings. When I looked into my nearly empty wallet, the brutal reality hit me. I had maybe a week to survive if I couldn't find a job. That first night in the room, I couldn't sleep. The blaring horns outside, the arguing neighbors through thin walls, and the raw pain in my chest kept me tossing and turning. I stared up at the ceiling, stained with watermarks, wondering how my life had come to this. 3 months ago, I was a happy bride. Now, I was a homeless woman. No money, no job, no future. The next morning, I set out to find work. I walked the streets, going into every shop, every restaurant, asking if they were hiring. My high heels, the last remnants of my old life, tore into my feet, drawing blood, but I had no money to buy new shoes. "Do you have experience?" It was the question I heard the most. No, I had to admit every time, but I learned fast. On the third day, a manager at a small restaurant finally nodded. "All right, you can try as a waitress. Night shifts, 6 p.m. to midnight, minimum wage plus tips." I agreed instantly. On my first shift, I was so clumsy I almost dropped a plate into a customer's lap. My fingers shook while writing orders, and I kept mixing up dishes. At the end of the night, I had earned a grand total of $15 in tips. "You'd better improve," the manager warned, "or don't bother coming back tomorrow." I went home, sank to the floor, and cried. But the next morning, I forced myself up, washed my face, and returned to the restaurant. I learned to smile no matter how exhausted I was, to balance multiple plates with shaky hands, to memorize orders without writing them down. After 2 weeks, the tips improved, slightly, but it still wasn't enough. So I picked up a second job, cleaning offices in the early morning. From 5 a.m. to 10 a.m., I scrubbed floors and wiped down desks before the office workers arrived. From 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., I tried to catch a few hours of sleep. Then from 6 p.m. to midnight, I was back on my feet, waiting tables. At first, my body rebelled against the brutal schedule. I often felt dizzy from exhaustion. One time, I fainted in the bathroom and only woke up 20 minutes later, already late for my shift. "Late again, and you're out," the restaurant manager barked, not even looking me in the eye. By the end of my first month, when I went to pay rent, the landlady looked at me with a strange mix of pity and worry. "You're getting too skinny," she said. "You should eat more." I wanted to tell her that I had cut down to 1 meal a day just to stretch my money, but I just smiled and nodded. The second month passed, then the third. My life became an endless cycle of work, restless sleep, and crushing loneliness. I no longer had time to cry, no energy to miss the past. Each day was just a fight to survive the next. Then one day, disaster struck. While serving a table of wealthy customers, I accidentally spilled a glass of red wine onto a man's expensive suit. "You clumsy fool," the man shouted, leaping to his feet. "Do you have any idea how much this suit costs? More than your whole month's salary." The tone, the words, they were painfully familiar. They reminded me of my mother-in-law, of all the ways I had once been humiliated. But this time, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel shame. I just felt tired. "I'm sorry about your suit," I said, my voice oddly calm. "But I won't apologize for being human. No one is born to serve you." The restaurant fell silent. The man glared at me, then demanded to see the manager. "You're fired," the manager said, shortly after, without a moment's hesitation. "And don't expect to get paid for today." I walked back to my tiny room through the rain. It seemed like all the worst days of my life came with rain. I had just lost my main job, my biggest source of income. How would I pay rent next month? How would I even survive? I knocked on the landlady's door, trying to explain, trying to ask for an extension. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice colder than I'd ever heard. "But business is business. If you can't pay by next week, you'll have to leave." That night, lying on the sagging bed, I realized I had finally hit rock bottom. No money, no job. Soon, no roof over my head. I had fought so hard, but it felt like fate itself was determined to crush me. Maybe they were right, I whispered into the darkness. Maybe I really am not good enough. What I didn't know was that sometimes you have to fall all the way down before you can rise, and I had no idea that tomorrow, the day I thought would mark my end, would actually be the beginning of something entirely new. The next morning, I still had to go to my early morning cleaning job at the office building. My mind was heavy with worry, my hands trembling slightly as I wiped down the polished wooden desks. How could I find another job so quickly? How would I pay rent? Where would I live if I got kicked out? "You've been wiping that desk for over 10 minutes. A sudden voice startled me. Standing before me was a middle-aged woman, her black hair streaked lightly with gray, sharp eyes softened by an unusual warmth. She wore a navy blue suit, clearly one of the executives. I'm sorry," I stammered, hastily moving to the next desk. "I didn't realize anyone would be here this early." "I always come early," she said, watching me with curious eyes. "But I've never seen someone clean a desk so thoroughly while their mind is clearly somewhere else." I didn't know what to say. I was trying to work as quickly as possible so I could start job hunting right after my shift. But instead of being annoyed, the woman pulled out a chair and sat down. "Sit with me," she said, motioning to the chair across from her. "I'll buy you a cup of coffee." I hesitated. I didn't want to get in trouble for chatting with a client. But there was something about her gaze that made me trust her. I put the rag down and sat, still unsure. "My name is Mai," she introduced herself. "I'm the CEO of this company." I'm Lynn," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "How long have you been working here, Lynn?" "About 3 months," I said. "And this isn't your only job, is it?" I blinked, surprised. "How did you know?" Mai smiled. "The calluses on your hands, they aren't just from cleaning, and the exhaustion in your eyes tells me you haven't been sleeping much, so I guessed you must be working more than one job." I don't know why, but suddenly I wanted to tell her everything. About losing my restaurant job, about nearly losing my place to live, about the long road that had brought me to this point. While I spoke, she simply listened, not interrupting once. "So they fired you because you stood up for your dignity," she said once I finished. "And now you're desperate." I nodded, feeling a little ashamed for pouring out so much to a stranger. "Lynn," Mai said, leaning in, her voice steady, "do you know how many early morning cleaners I've seen over the years?" I don't know." "Hundreds," she said, "but do you know how many of them cleaned as thoroughly as you did, even when their minds were elsewhere? None. Not one. You pay attention to detail even when you're overwhelmed. That's rare." She stood, walked to a cabinet in the corner, and pulled out a folder. "Do you know what our company does?" she asked. Something with consulting?" I guessed. Mai chuckled. "We are an e-commerce company. We help people build online stores and grow their businesses from scratch. And right now, we're looking for people to join our customer support team, working remotely from their computers." She pushed the folder toward me. "This is information about our training program. If you're interested, I can help you enroll. The starting salary isn't huge, but it's enough for you to afford a better place to live. And more importantly, it'll teach you skills you can use for the rest of your life." I stared at the folder, barely believing what I was hearing. "But why me? You don't even know me." Mai smiled warmly. "I've been watching you for a while, Lynn. You're the first to arrive and the last to leave. You clean places others overlook. You don't complain. You don't make noise. That's exactly the kind of person I want on my team." She stood, adjusting her blazer. "Think about it," she said. "The training program starts next Monday. Oh, and here." She handed me a business card and a small envelope. "This is my contact information, and this is an advance toward your tuition. Consider it an investment in your future." I took the envelope with trembling hands. I don't know what to say. "Why are you helping me?" Mai smiled again, the kind of smile that lit up the whole room. "Because 20 years ago, I was in your exact shoes, working 3 jobs just to survive, and someone gave me a chance. Now it's my turn to pass it on." When I walked out of that office building that day, it felt like I was dreaming. But the envelope in my pocket was real. Mai's business card was real. And for the first time in months, a new feeling swelled inside me. Hope. I didn't yet know that this chance encounter would change my entire life. Mai wouldn't just teach me about online business. She would become my mentor, my guide, and eventually, my dearest friend. She would help me see the potential I had never dared believe in. The road ahead was still long and hard, but for the first time I could see a light at the end of the tunnel. The training program at Mai's company marked the first true turning point in my new life. During the first week, I was completely overwhelmed by the sheer amount of knowledge I had to absorb. Marketing terms, data analysis, website design, customer service. It was all foreign to me. "I don't think I can do this," I confessed to Mai after one particularly grueling class. "That's only because it's new to you," she replied calmly. "But do you know what sets you apart from others? You don't quit. I can see it in your eyes." And I didn't quit. Every night after class, I would go back to my tiny rented room, the one I could now afford to pay for on time, and keep studying. I stayed up until 2, sometimes 3 in the morning, poring over every material, watching every tutorial. Somehow, the desperation that once weighed me down had transformed into something else: stubborn perseverance. After 3 months, not only did I complete the course, but I was officially hired as a full-time customer support employee. For the first time in what felt like forever, I had a stable job, enough to cover my basic living expenses and even save a little. "You've done well," Mai said during my first performance review, "but I want you to think bigger. You don't want to stay in customer support forever, do you?" "I want to learn more," I admitted. "I want to understand how these businesses actually work. How they make money." Mai smiled. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Then it's time for you to start your own business." "My own business? But I don't have any capital." "You don't need much to start online. You need an idea, a skill, or a product. And most importantly, you need hard work, something you've proven you have in abundance." I started with a small online store selling handmade crafts I created in my spare time. At first, the revenue barely covered a weekly cup of coffee, but I stayed consistent. I learned how to take better product photos, write more compelling descriptions, and gradually built a tiny customer base. 6 months passed. Then a year. I moved into a cleaner, brighter apartment. My day job remained stable, and my online store started turning a small profit. Not much, but enough to become a second source of income. More importantly, I discovered the joy of creating something from nothing. One day, while scrolling through customer comments on my store, I found a surprising message. "Your products are amazing, but your story is even more inspiring. I watched your video and was so moved. Thank you for sharing." Video? I didn't understand. I had never posted any videos. After some digging, I discovered that Mai had recorded one of our conversations, with my permission, for the company's Success Stories project. The video had been posted on the company's website and somehow gone viral on social media. At first, I felt uneasy about having my personal story so exposed, but then the messages started pouring in, from women who were struggling, fighting to rebuild their lives from the rubble. "Your story gave me hope. I'm going through something similar. How do I start? Can you share more about your journey?" And so I began to share. At first, it was just short posts on my social media, then simple videos filmed on my phone. I shared what I had learned, the obstacles I had overcome, tips for starting a business with almost no money. The more I shared, the more positive responses I received. People weren't just interested in business tips, they wanted to hear about my personal journey. How I had overcome pain, rejection, betrayal. "I'm not anyone special," I often said in my videos. "I'm just someone who decided not to let others define my worth." 2 years after leaving my mother-in-law's house, the income from my online store was enough for me to quit my customer support job and focus full-time on my business. I rented a small office, hired 2 employees, and began expanding my product line. But the real game changer came when I started offering online courses, teaching others how to start businesses from scratch, how to build a personal brand, how to overcome fear and self-doubt. Somehow, the pain I had once endured had become my greatest asset. It allowed me to connect deeply with others who were also searching for their own path. "You've built a little empire," Mai said one day over lunch, "now as friends and business partners." "I don't know about an empire," I laughed, "but I've found my purpose, and that's priceless." 3 years after walking out of my mother-in-law's mansion in the pouring rain, I had expanded my business into a full-fledged company, an online store, a training academy, and a brand consulting service. My name started appearing in business magazines in articles about notable women entrepreneurs. I was invited to speak at events, sharing my story with crowds of hopeful faces. One day, flipping through a business magazine and seeing my own face listed among top 40 entrepreneurs under 40, I realized how far I had come. From the girl with a small suitcase, stepping into the rain with nowhere to go, to the woman who had built her own future from scratch. From someone who used to cry alone in a bathroom at night, to someone who inspired others to keep fighting. I had changed, not just on the outside, not just in status, but deep within. The pain had forged a beast inside me, not a monster in the cruel sense, but a deep, indomitable strength I had never known I possessed. A strength that refused to give up, refused to be defined by others, refused to accept failure as the end. I had never forgotten the feeling of being abandoned, betrayed, humiliated, but now those memories no longer hurt. They were scars, reminders of wounds that had healed, proof that I had survived and thrived. What I didn't know was that soon those old scars would be tested again, in ways I could never have imagined. 5 years, exactly 5 years had passed since the day I walked out of that house, soaked by the rain, with a small suitcase and a shattered heart. 5 years since I had sworn that one day they would come looking for me. That morning began like any other. I woke up in my penthouse, a luxurious apartment I had purchased after my company expanded internationally. I was sipping my coffee, scrolling through emails, when my assistant called. "Ms. Lin, there's a visitor waiting at the office," she said, her voice slightly tense. She won't give her name, but says she's family. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't been in contact with my old family for a long time. My parents had passed away before I got married, and I had no siblings. The only family it could be. "I'll be right there," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. When I entered the office, I spotted her immediately, my former mother-in-law. 5 years had left clear marks on her. The once jet black hair was now more silver than black. The once smooth skin now etched with deep wrinkles, but what stunned me most was her eyes, no longer cold and haughty, but filled with anxiety, even fear. "Hello?" I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the storm raging inside me. She scrambled to her feet, nearly tripping over herself. "Lin, you look so different." I said nothing. I simply looked at her, waiting. I knew she wasn't here to visit, nor to apologize. She wanted something. "May I have a moment of your time?" she asked, voice trembling. I led her into my private office, a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. I remembered how proud she used to be of her husband's lavish office. Now, mine was grander than anything she had ever known. "Please, have a seat," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. She sat down, her eyes darting around the room, unable to hide her astonishment. You've become very successful." "Yes," I answered simply. "Why have you come after all these years?" She lowered her head, wringing her frail hands together. We're in trouble. My husband's company. It's on the brink of bankruptcy." I stayed silent. I already knew. I had been keeping tabs on them from afar, not out of concern, but to know exactly where my former enemies stood. "We've lost almost everything," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "The bank is foreclosing on our house. My husband, he couldn't handle the pressure. He's in the hospital after a stroke." A part of me wanted to feel triumphant. Wasn't this the perfect revenge I had once dreamed of? But instead, all I felt was emptiness. "And your son?" I asked, my voice steady even as old wounds stirred. He changed a lot after you left, became bitter, cold. He blamed me for driving you away," she said, her voice cracking. "He divorced his second wife. Now, with the company falling apart, he's completely broken." I turned to look out the window, down at the bustling city below. 5 years ago, I had stood on the sidewalk, looking up at these towering buildings, wondering if I would ever make it. Now, I was the one standing above it all, and they were the ones below. "So, what do you want from me?" I asked, turning back to face her. "We need help," she said. voice quivering. "The company needs an investment to survive this crisis. And I've heard about your success, about your company." This was the moment the words I had once screamed into the rain became reality. "One day, you will come to me and beg." "You want me to invest in your husband's company?" I asked, unable to hide my astonishment. "Not just invest," she pleaded. "We need you to save it. Your knowledge, your skills, your connections. I've seen what you've built from nothing, while we, with all our wealth and privilege, lost everything." I was silent for a long time. This was the moment every fiber of my being had once craved. To say no. To make her feel the humiliation, the rejection, the devastation she had once inflicted on me. But as I looked at her, older, frail, desperate, I realized something. Revenge didn't matter to me anymore. I had already won. "I'll review your proposal," I said, my voice calm and measured. "But I will need to see all financial reports, business plans, and meet with all stakeholders." Her eyes lit up with a glimmer of hope. "Then, you'll help us?" "I didn't say that," I replied firmly. "I said I would consider it. And if I do help, it will be a business transaction. Nothing personal. We are no longer family. You understand that, don't you?" She bowed her head, tears falling onto her frail hands. "I understand. And I'm sorry. For everything I did to you. I know it's too late, but I truly am sorry." I said nothing. The apology meant little to me now, not because I hadn't forgiven, but because I had moved beyond the pain long ago. I didn't need her apology or her recognition. As I walked her to the door, I watched her frail figure shuffle away, shoulders slumped. 5 years ago, this woman had everything: money, power, pride. Now she had almost nothing, not even her pride. I stood by the window, watching her disappear into the crowd below, and a strange feeling washed over me. Not triumph, not revenge, but peace. A circle had finally closed, and now I stood at a crossroads. What would I do with this newfound power? Would I use it to seek vengeance, or to prove that I had become something greater, stronger than they ever imagined? For 2 weeks after the meeting with my former mother-in-law, I lived in a storm of inner turmoil. By day, I carried on with my work as usual, meetings, decisions, partnerships, but by night, alone in my vast penthouse, conflicting emotions flooded my mind. "What are you gonna do?" Mai asked as we lunched together. I had told her everything about the encounter. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to say no, to feel the satisfaction of watching them lose everything, but another part wants to what?" Mai looked at me with that deep, understanding gaze. "Another part wants to help. Not for them, but for me. To prove that I'm not like them." Mai nodded, sipping her tea thoughtfully. "You know," she said, "when we're deeply hurt, we face 2 roads to healing. One is revenge, to make those who hurt us feel our pain. The other is much harder, to rise above the pain, to become someone better, stronger than they ever were." I sat in silence, letting her words settle deep inside me. "But only you can decide which road is yours," Mai added gently. "No one else can choose it for you." That night, I opened the financial documents my former mother-in-law had sent. The situation was even worse than I had imagined. The company was drowning in debt, its stock value nearly worthless, and creditors were closing in. There was no miracle solution. Only a complete restructuring and a major investment could save it. I opened my laptop and began sketching a plan, not because I had decided to help, but to see if salvation was even possible. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Despite the mess, the company still had valuable assets and potential. With the right strategy and strong leadership, it could be saved. The real question was, did I want to do it? I stood at the window, staring out over the glittering city lights. I remembered that night 5 years ago, standing in the rain, heartbroken, lost, betrayed. The pain was still there, deep inside. But I also remembered what Mai had told me the day we met. 20 years ago, I was exactly where you are now, and someone gave me a chance. I had been given a chance, and now I had the power to offer that chance to someone else, even to those who had once hurt me. The next morning, I called my former mother-in-law. "I've reviewed the situation," I said, voice steady and professional. "I will meet with you and your son tomorrow at my office. Bring all key executives." You'll help us?" she asked, voice trembling with hope. "I'll make a proposal," I replied, making no promises. The meeting was held in the largest conference room at my company. When I entered, everyone rose to their feet, a gesture of respect they had never shown me before. And then I saw him, my ex-husband. 5 years had changed him. Silver streaked his hair, his face was gaunt, and his eyes, the eyes I had once loved, were now filled with pain and regret. Our eyes met for a brief electric moment, and in that moment I saw everything he wanted to say but couldn't. Regret, shame, maybe even longing. I turned away, locking my emotions behind a wall. This was business, not personal. I opened my presentation, a complete restructuring plan for the company. "Here is my proposal," I said, my voice clear and unwavering. "My company will purchase 51% of the shares, becoming the majority shareholder. We will inject new capital, restructure the debt, and replace the entire leadership team." The room fell into stunned silence. They understood only their family would lose control over the company they had built for decades. "In return," I continued, "the company will be saved. Debts will be paid, loyal employees will keep their jobs, and your family will retain 49% of the ownership and its dignity." My former mother-in-law stared down at the table, unable to meet my gaze. "We have no other choice, do we?" she whispered. "There's always a choice," I said. "You can reject my proposal and seek another solution, but time is running out." Finally, my ex-husband spoke. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Is it revenge?" I looked him straight in the eye, calm, unwavering. "If it were revenge, I wouldn't be sitting here," I said. "I'm doing this because it's a smart business move, and maybe just a little, because once upon a time, someone gave me a chance when I needed it most." The meeting ended with a preliminary agreement. They would review my proposal and respond within 48 hours. As everyone filed out, my ex-husband lingered. "Lynn!" He called my name so softly I almost didn't hear. I turned, facing the man I had once loved, once hated, and now felt I wasn't even sure anymore. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I wasn't strong enough to protect you. I didn't stand up to my mother. Letting you go was the biggest mistake of my life." I looked at him, feeling no anger, no pain, only a profound, strange peace. "I forgave you a long time ago," I said, "not because you deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Carrying anger only hurts the one who bears it." Tears welled up in his eyes. "You've changed so much." "We all change," I said gently. "Now do the right thing, for the company and for those who depend on it." 2 days later, they accepted my offer. The deal was signed, and I became the new majority owner of the company they had built over generations. At the press conference announcing the deal, I stood beside my former mother-in-law and ex-husband, not as a triumphant enemy, but as a business partner. Many were shocked to learn about our past connection, but I said nothing about it. The past was the past. As we left the conference, my former mother-in-law grasped my hand, her eyes brimming with tears. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help us after everything we did?" I smiled. not a smile of victory, but a smile of release. "Because I chose to be better, stronger than those who once hurt me," I said softly. "And that is the sweetest revenge of all." I had chosen forgiveness, not for them, but for myself. I had chosen to use my power not for vengeance, but for healing. And in doing so, I found a strength I never knew I had, the strength of compassion. 2 years had passed since I bought out my former in-laws company. Under new leadership, the company had not only recovered, but flourished. Loyal employees were promoted, new ideas were welcomed and nurtured, and the house where I was once thrown out now belonged to the company and had been transformed into a training center for women entrepreneurs. Today, I stood on the stage at a women's success conference. In front of me were hundreds of eager faces, young women full of dreams, searching for their own paths, perhaps facing the same hardships I once did. Many people ask me about the secret to success. I began, my voice echoing through the hall. They want the magic formula, the shortcuts, the tricks to get where I am today. I smiled, glancing down at the audience. The truth is, there's no secret formula, no shortcut. My success was built on a foundation of failure, rejection, and pain. But more importantly, it was built on the determination not to let those things define me. I told them my story of a young woman despised and rejected by her own in-laws, of the dark days spent struggling just to survive, and of the long, painful climb back from the ashes. There were nights I slept on the floor because I couldn't afford a bed, I shared. Days when I survived on just one meal to save money. Times when it felt like the whole world was against me. I paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. But I learned that life's greatest challenges aren't meant to crush us. They're meant to shape us, to forge us, to turn us into the people we were meant to become. I remembered standing in front of my former mother-in-law and ex-husband after all those years, feeling no fear, no anger, only peace. Many of us, when we are hurt, dream of revenge, I continued. We want those who wronged us to suffer as we did. But here's what I've learned. True revenge doesn't come from hurting others. True revenge comes from rising above them, from becoming better, stronger, and more successful than they ever imagined. I smiled, sweeping my gaze across the room. Don't seek revenge with hate. Seek revenge with your brilliance. Let your success be your loudest statement. Among the crowd, I spotted a familiar face. Mai, the woman who had given me my first real chance, smiling with pride. And beside her, my former mother-in-law, now part of our advisory team at the training center, using her own life lessons to help young women forge their paths. People often ask me if I still resent those who hurt me. I said, my voice softening. The answer is no, because without them, I wouldn't be who I am today. Without those trials, I would have never discovered my strength, and I wouldn't be standing here sharing this story with you. I closed my speech with a question and an invitation. So, how will you choose to respond to those who doubted you, who hurt you? Will you let the pain define you? Or will you use it as a springboard to rise higher, to shine brighter than ever before? Thunderous applause filled the hall as I stepped off the stage. Many women came forward, tears in their eyes, eager to share their own stories, eager to thank me for showing them another way. And in that moment, I realized this was the true victory. Not the money, not the business success, but the ability to touch hearts, to inspire others to overcome their own battles. Life had taught me a profound lesson. Sometimes, those who try to break you unknowingly push you toward the life you were always meant to live. And that is the greatest gift they could ever give. Thank you for listening to my story today. It has been an emotional journey, from the darkest moments to the bright light of triumph. If my story touched your heart, please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. I would love to hear about the challenges you've faced and how you've overcome them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on more inspiring stories. Every week, we'll explore extraordinary journeys of ordinary people and the powerful lessons they've learned along the way. Hit the like button if you found value in this video and share it with someone who might need a little extra encouragement today. I'm Lynn, and I believe each of us has the power to write our own victory story. See you in the next video.